Thank you so much for joining us today for our second Bloomsbury Handbook speaker series session featuring our very own YU faculty, Dr. Nishreena Nisham, and one of her co-authors on the chapter, Suma Balachandran. Their chapter in Volume 1 of the Bloomsbury Handbook series explores three distinct leadership approaches and how they can be effectively utilized to navigate the complexities of organizational change, particularly in times of uncertain futures. So we're really excited for the session. Sorry about the short delay at the beginning. I'm going to turn it over to them now so that we can get started right away. And if at any point you have any issues with Zoom, issues with seeing the slides or audio issues, please don't hesitate to send me a private chat on Zoom and I'll work with you to get that figured out as quickly as possible. So over to you two.
Thank you very much, Jenny, and a very warm welcome to everyone present today. I'd like to first start off with the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge the land Yorkville University operates on in Ontario is the traditional territory of many nations, including Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee and the Wendat people, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. We also acknowledge that the applicable treaty for this region is referred to as the Toronto Purchase. With that, I'd like to give a brief introduction about me and my two co-authors. For people who know me, I am Professor Nisham. For people who don't know me, here's a brief blurb about who I am and my background. I've been in the industry for a little over 12 years now. I am very passionate about student learning and student success. My research interest focuses on cross-cultural experiential learning pedagogy. And during my free time, I'd like to give back to the community that I currently live and work in. So I volunteer in the finance board at the YWCA here in the Durham region. And also I'm an entrepreneurial coach at Futurepreneur Canada. Now, a little bit about my two co-authors. The first co-author is Shelly. Unfortunately, Shelly has some technical difficulty. She's connecting with us from another province, and she wasn't able to make it on time. And so she sends her regrets. But this is a bit about Shelly. She's a writer, a motivational speaker, a counselor for mental health, and her area of specialization is psychology. And I would like to give it over to my second co-author, Suma, to introduce herself to us, please.
Thank you, ma'am. So, as far as I'm concerned, I'm a finance professional. That is my first priority, but I have also done project management. And my area of expertise has always been finance, but at the same time, I was also a member of the CMA board, IMA board, and I was working in Kuwait prior to, so I was actively involved in the board activities. And recently I shifted to Toronto, and then I have joined the Toronto board over here. And I believe it has been a rewarding experience so far in my career, and in addition to my normal career as in the corporate. So that's all about me so far, and ma'am, she has been my mentor as well. So many thanks to give me this opportunity to work with you in this book for your chapter. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Suma. So a special note about the two co-authors, they are my former students, and I am privileged and proud to bring them here into this platform with me. They shared the stage with me and they've participated in this amazing book project. So thank you, Suma and Shelly. Now, a bit about our agenda for this afternoon. I'm going to walk you through an introduction, inspirations for this chapter, a bit about leadership perspectives. And whilst we were writing out this chapter, we kind of proposed a model for leadership in the education industry. And I'm going to talk to you a bit about that as well. That's the hybrid model of leadership. I'll walk you through complexities, values that successful leaders need to lead during unprecedented times. Where is leadership going into the future with AI and all of those amazing stuff? Where are we headed to in terms of the future of leadership? And we will conclude there with a few key lessons for leadership in the corporate industry as well as in the field of education. So really, what I'd like to do now is to set the stage for this particular chapter. This is chapter 15 of the first volume in several volumes of the Bloomsbury Handbook series. And last week we had our president, York University president, and Mary Drinkwater introduced to us a bit about the Bloomsbury book project. So I had the opportunity to develop this particular chapter, and a lot of the concepts and a lot of the ideas that you will hear me talking about as we go through the chapter, it really focuses on uncertainties and change and driving transformation within an organization. And somewhere in the chapter, I'd also spend some time talking about ethics and the ethical aspects of leadership as well. So a lot more to come as we progress, but this is sort of the foundation of what the chapter really is built on. So the chapter will speak about the psychological aspects of leadership. It'll speak about empathy, certain characteristics and certain traits that leaders really have to cultivate in order to bring about that impact. We'll spend a lot of time talking about leadership styles just because within that chapter, I had the opportunity of interviewing a prominent leader, and during our conversations that we had, he spent a lot of time explaining to me the multiple different styles of lead and the multiple different leadership styles that leaders kind of adapt to given their environment and the circumstances. So that's something that I'd like to spend some time talking to you about today as well. So the motivation or the inspiration for the chapter really is drawn from a one-on-one interview that I had with Sir John Shin. It was quite a long interview. It ran for over an hour and a half. I've sort of put a small screenshot of our Zoom conversation that we had. So right at the bottom left of the screen, and that's Sir John Shin. And during our long conversations, it was interesting. It was thought-provoking. He shared a lot of stories. He's a prolific writer as well as a movie producer. And he really spoke from his decades of experience as a leader, leading in the United States and different parts of the globe. So I'm going to give you a brief intro to Sir John Shin and who he really is. So he is a successful entrepreneur. He's the founder of CEO Accenture Financial Partners. He has over 7,000 financial agents that operate under Accenture, and his business spans across 26 states. He is a recognized business leader. He's been constantly featured in prestigious magazines like Ford and Advantage. He's also a philanthropist. He's the co-founder of the not-for-profit organization called All for One. And this not-for-profit organization operates in 6 countries across the globe. And very recently in 2019, he and his wife, they were knighted for their humanitarian work, demonstrating leadership beyond the business realm. He's also the author of the best-selling book, How Rich Asians Think, and he's also the movie producer of the Think and Grow Rich legacy movie. So if you happen to come across this movie, I highly recommend you should watch this movie because a lot of the examples that he shared with me in the chapter are in direct relationship to the Think and Grow Rich legacy movie as well. All right, so where did it really all begin? I have been in contact with John for a couple of years now, and we were previously having conversations about writing a book in terms of cooperation and leadership. And so that was when the conversation started opening up with the Bloomsbury chapter. And I approached him and put forward the proposal, and he was very much interested in being interviewed. And the chapter opened out, it flowed out like a case study between myself and John. And during our interview, we really went back to the beginning. So that's how it began. So I told John, take me back to where it all began for you, your humble beginnings. How did you become who you are today? And it was very interesting when he spoke to me about his story in the 1960s. He and his family, they immigrated to the United States from South Korea, and they had this idea of somehow pursuing and reaching their American dream with limited resources. And his parents constantly, they were like a driving force for John. And he goes on to speak in elaborate detail, describing all of the aspirations and all of the sort of opportunities that they gave to John and set him, and he also has one sister. So they set him and his sister up for success. They were always constantly goal-driven, and he had sort of like a very sort of disciplined upbringing in his domestic home front. He had a timetable that he had to follow. Go to bed by 9 a.m. You got to wake up at 5 a.m. Got to go and do your workout. So his parents were very much part of his grooming and his lifestyle at a very young age. And with that, I'd like to also pause for a moment and bring in my co-author, Suma. Right? Unlike just like John, we've all gone to different parts of the globe, and we're all pursuing our different dreams in different ways. So Suma, why don't you talk to me a bit about yourself? You came here to Canada as an international student, and you're here to pursue your dreams. So share with us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Definitely. Thank you. I'll do that. I hope I'm audible right now.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So I was actually born in India, but I was raised up in Middle East. I was living in Kuwait and did most of my schooling over there, and I worked over there as well most of my life. And for me, my parents are middle class, and but like you can always dream big. I always dream big, and then like I have specific goals in the sense. I went to finance because I had a passion for that subject, and I dived into it because I really loved it, and that's how I started learning accounting and all the related financial parts. So when I approach the subject, when I approach something, I do it in all earnest. If I really don't like something, I cannot do it, so I won't do it. So that was my core policy. So basically, what I did was like when I really loved the subject and went into that field, I gave my all into it, and then I knew that this is my way, and then I worked for it. And I started from the very beginning. Like initially, I started as intern, and I really did 2-3 years of intern work so that I can really understand and practice the accounting as such. And then I moved forward to normal work and also, and I built up my career slowly from the very beginning. And until I became a finance manager, and then I have actively involved in financial and non-financial projects for the company. And I got an interest in project management as well. So I realized that I have to properly learn if I need to take up that area and collaborate it. So that's how I ended up as an international student and came over here. And of course, it was a rewarding journey all through, and I've met some amazing people all over the way, including them. And yeah, so I completed my studies, and I'm on that path for further improvement in my career, and as well as my extracurricular activities and mentoring for the chapter as well. So that is me in a nutshell.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Thanks
That's
for
amazing.
asking
Thank you.
me.
Thank you, Suma. Thank you so much for sharing with all of us here today a little bit about, your humble beginnings and where it all began. And I'm pretty sure most of us can go back to our own beginnings to understand where it all began to us and what really brought us or made us who we are and what we are today. And so in talking to John, I realized very early on in our conversations that for John, because of this constant sort of push that he was receiving, especially from his parents, he was always in between whether there was this invisible relationship that he had, and he was constantly in between whether he needs to keep his parents happy or whether he needs to pursue something and follow his own goals and his own dreams. So he was always in this dilemma. And that was something that I started to catch on when he was explaining to me in detail about his beginnings. And at that particular point in time, John also mentioned that he was not an academic. He struggled extensively in academia. He had to stay up very late into the night in order to study, to pass exams. He struggled to get through his SAT exams. So because his parents were this huge driving force, constantly pushing him and setting very high goals for him, he had no choice but to pursue academia. But it was at that point that his breakthrough really came for him. He had friends who went on to pursue different degrees and different careers, but his parents were constantly driving him to excel in academia. And so in order to keep them happy and to satisfy them, he went into college. He struggled very hard to get the relevant credits and maintain a GPA that eventually got him into the University of Southern California. And during the 2 years that he spent in university, he had the opportunity to meet amazing teachers, mentors, counselors that really helped him put him on his path towards success. So I think this is something that a lot of us, and even our students, if we are teachers teaching students, we can relate to this, because we always have these students who come up to us and ask us, I really want to do this. I want to specialize in becoming a project manager. But then my parents want me to focus on finance or focus on architecture, or we have students talking to us about these things. And this was the kind of dilemma that John was in as well. But regardless, despite all of the challenges that he was going through with his parents' involvement and him wanting to pursue something completely different to what his parents wanted him to pursue, he still managed to complete his several years of university education. And later on in life, he went to specialize in a law degree. And after the law degree, he was given an honorary doctorate as well, which came to him very much later in his life. But this was young John, somewhere in the age span of 20 to 25 years, who really had to really focus on what he wanted to do, and he was looking for that aha moment, his some sort of motivation that he wanted. And he realized at that time that there was a competition, that there was some competition, and one of the prizes given during that competition was a mongoose bicycle. And at the time, he was very fascinated to outsell all of his classmates and to receive this prize. And so that motivation was one of the early sort of traits that he found that he had as an individual. His ability to sell, his ability to negotiate, his ability to talk. He was driven by this passion. And these were his exact words. When he was talking to me, he said, I wanted this bicycle so bad I could not sleep. I wanted the bicycle so bad I went from door to door to door in my neighborhood because I wanted to sell all of these chocolates and raise the funds in order to get a prize. So it was not really about him becoming the number one student and excelling academically, or him pursuing his parents' wishes. It was really about what he was made up of, his motivation. And he realized that at some point in his life. And that motivation then became John's formative years in his career. After he finished university, he went headlong into corporate America. One of his first jobs was working at Coca-Cola. And even at that time, as an executive working in a Fortune 500 corporation, he gave me a lot of examples about rigidity and hierarchy and bureaucracy and inefficiency, where he wanted to bring about change. And he wanted to have conversations and dialogues, but it was very challenging in order to get people to listen, merely because of the way the corporation has been structured. And this created a lot of frustration in him. And then he realized that, his passion was not to pursue a career in a corporation or, climb up the career ladder in a corporation. He really wanted to be a game changer. He wanted to create opportunities for people. And that's when the entrepreneurial aspect, coupled with his passion for negotiation and sales and leadership, they all started to blend in. So for John, really, working at corporate America was his turning point. It led him to seek his true north. So that was his light bulb moment. Now, from there, I would like to pass over the presentation to my co-author Suma, who will walk you through some of the deeper elements of our chapter. So Suma will walk you through leadership, through the environment that nurtures leadership, and also how very important experience is in navigating leaders and helping leaders navigate complexities and change. So Suma, why don't you speak to us a little bit about value-informed leadership, and also from your own background, your own corporate experience, give us some examples. Have you come across a value-informed leader from your own professional background?
Sure. Thank you, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
So when I move on to value-informed leadership, but prior to that, I would just say leadership, of course, evolves from both experience as well as your expertise. And so when you are an experienced leader, there will be an impact on how you have seen the previous experiences and how you apply it in the scenarios. So that obviously makes an impact on how it goes along with the people who are following you, as well as how you train them. So that really does make a difference, but it's not always the whole thing. So when leadership is based on values, so there are values or feelings which goes into the decision-making process, which includes empathy and how you are growing or training your employees or your trainees, as well as how you are helping them develop, grow and develop. So that zeal, dedication, and the respect, mutual respect that you receive and which you give, which that really makes a lot of impact in that is kind of a cutting edge between how you define and differentiate leaders. So when we say value-informed leadership, all of these elements which we have mentioned over here, like empowerment, growth, vision, etc. So they bring in that specific focus on efficiency, and it will help you move forward to bring in or support your trainees so that they can be built in or grown up as like future leaders, and they can bring in that their expertise. They can fearlessly move forward and execute whatever is in their hands. So with that, I will just move on to the next slide, ma'am. Yeah. So before I give an example of the leaders that I have come across, I will just go through the different kinds of leadership that we are having. So first would be transactional leadership. So transactional leadership is where it's kind of like a reward-based system. So you're giving something based on you're giving something and you're getting something in return. So that kind of leadership, it works in some settings, but not always, because it doesn't give you that satisfaction for the trainees or the employees, because it is kind of rigid to an extent, and it implies that you are just getting it done for the sake of getting things done for short-term goals. And it works in certain settings, but not always. But when it comes to transformational leadership, if a leader is transformational, he is bringing in some change. So he has a vision, and then he tries to implement the vision through bringing in the personal growth element for those employees. So that he trains them, and he is willing to, it's kind of like a servant leadership. So he is willing to step in and be with them and to grow with them and understand them and to help them be the change. So that kind of leadership is one step ahead of transactional leadership. Then we have got charismatic leadership, where we mostly see in politicians, especially, like there is a huge group of followers. Just because of their charm, they are influencing the followers. The cons of this kind of leadership is like sometimes the followers get to be too influenced by the persons that they don't take rational decisions when they're following a person, and it can create a crisis depending on the kind of dependency that they are having. If the leader is not in the right path, then it can create chaos. And then we have the hybrid approach, where all of the elements of Debo leadership can be combined. And basically, we can draw in the positive elements, and we can bring out the best kind of leadership that we can use for any particular situation based on the available circumstances. So these are the 4 kinds of leadership that we are discussing right now, that we have discussed in our book. And coming back to ma'am's question, so like the leaders that I have seen actually different kind of leaders, the very traditional ones, who are actually very supportive of the team, but at the same time, some of them are not able to push forward through the changing times. And then the very dynamic leaders who, like, they understand the needs, but at the same time, they are aware that they have to take some hard decisions, and they go through it. But at the same time, trying to bring in everyone together and to train them for the purpose that they have been there. So that is very, very important in any kind of leadership, I believe. So coming back to hybrid leadership, I believe I have just mentioned it slightly, and I think ma'am will take over from this point.
Thank you, Suma. Thank you very much. And it's also very interesting, when you look at your own backgrounds and you look at all of the different leaders that you've come across throughout your lifetime, and you're trying to put them into these different models, and you think, wait a minute, can I put this leader into this box or this compartment where this leader is transactional? Can I put the next leader that I have come across as being transformational? It's very difficult. It's very difficult because, like when you read the chapter, you will find out I've written a little bit, or rather, one of my co-authors, Shelly, speaks a little bit about the psychological aspects, the behavioral aspects that influences leadership. And so it's because people and their behavior change from over time, and they also adapt and evolve to their environment. We decided that creating this hybrid approach is the most efficient approach for leadership. And some of our inspirations to coin in the hybrid leadership model came in from research that was done centuries ago. And one of the most recent contributions to that research was through the works of Bass, who speaks a lot about full range leadership, where Bass goes on to say, okay, we've got transformational, transactional, and we've got laissez-faire leadership styles. When we put them all together, we get a leader who can lead and navigate through complexities and change. But there's so many other aspects, so many other elements to it. And today, more than ever, we see how important the charismatic aspect for leadership is. How very important it is for leaders to portray those charismatic elements and behavioral traits. So really leadership, I strongly believe leadership is the most studied but least understood discipline because there's so much of complexities involved in it. So within the chapter, we put together the hybrid model, and I thought this is a fitting image for a hybrid leader, because the leader now tries to bring together the situational element, the style and integration, the charisma, the ability to adapt to an environment, as well as this continuous refinement strategy where you're constantly looking at new and better ways of doing things. So you're actually looking for best practices. And all of this combined will then help these leaders navigate these challenges and complexities. So this particular hybrid model for leadership was also something that came about through my conversation with John. And being a leader, leading through a change and leading through complexities, And also, John is an entrepreneurial coach. So he's been coaching and mentoring leaders to become leaders themselves. He sort of tells me that each person or each individual that he interacts with, whether him as an individual becoming a leader and leading his corporation, or the entrepreneurial aspect where he is grooming and coaching leaders, each individual has different definitive needs, and each leader will have a different approach and a style. And so combining all of this together is really like a fine basket of leadership. So within the chapter, like towards the latter parts of the chapter, I've given some examples about flexibility in leadership. Leaders sometimes, or let's say in most occasions, don't always have the right answer. And if we continue to look up to leaders to give us the right answer, it sometimes creates this time gap between waiting for an answer, whereas we have the ability and the resources and the skills that we need to implement what we want or should be implementing in the roles that we do. And so leaders are now constantly becoming more and more flexible, and they've understood the relevance and the importance to empower employees. And that's a phenomenal example of how leaders navigate through complexities. We saw a lot of that during the pandemic, where it was like a switch. We had to flip the switch and then suddenly navigate and change and find new ways and means of doing things, and at the same time make that work for us, especially in the education sector. I remember the heydays of the pandemic. I had to go into campus and we had an emergency meeting, and all we were told was we're switching all of the in-person classes online. You will have to now create a strategy to get your students engaged online, get them to be as present as possible, minimize the turnover, and find ways and means to teach students. So much so that the education industry has forever changed now. And now a lot of colleges and universities, across the board, they've got policies now that say employees can come into campus 2 days or 3 days a week. Countries like the UK, they're implementing having a 3 or 4 day work week. So that's flexibility. And that really comes to us because we've been through unprecedented times. And then we have the resilience components, where building resilience really is about dialogue. A lot of the time, we are very good at working in silos. We want to be by ourselves. We want to work independently. It's very challenging for us to collaborate. And me as a professor, I see that inside the classroom as well. It's when we talk to students, and we tell them, hey, you got to work in a group. This is teamwork. And you would get them, looking at each other and saying, well, can I do this by myself? And so really creating that culture of dialogue and collaboration and communication and transparency, we're still a long way from that. We've done a lot of work working together, but there's still a little element of resistance, especially when it comes to the education environment. Even with undergraduate students or postgraduate students, there's this culture of working independently, working in silos. And then we have leveraging technology. Today, with the advent of AI, there is a lot of revolution happening in the education industry. We're using digital tools like we've never used before. We are our own instructional designer. We've learned our own technological skills, and we are able to design our own templates. And that's the power of technology, because it's available, it's accessible, and it's a matter of having access to the resources and training so that you can then leverage that to create the resilience, to create the flexibility that we need. So coming towards the latter part of the book, really, this was one question that I put forward to John, and I asked him, well, if you were to summarize to me some of the key ingredients for a leader to lead successfully, what would they be? And what I thought was a fitting example is the 3 images that I've put on the far left corner of the screen. And you might be wondering, well, I can see some people cooking and making amazing beverages. How is that connected to leadership? So this is an interesting event that I attended this week, Tuesday. It was Masters of the Craft. It was a domestic, or rather a national chef competition that was hosted by Marriott Hotels and Resorts, where they brought in all of these chefs from different parts of Canada. So it was truly sort of a very vibrant environment where there were chefs all coming in. And so the person to the bottom was putting up a beverage to be presented to a group of judges. And then the person in the center was doing pastry and desserts, and the one right at the top was culinary. So I had the privilege of being invited as a judge to this amazing competition. And apart from tasting all of the fantastic food that these talented chefs put out, the interesting thing is, at the start of the competition, they were under a lot of pressure. Each chef was given a time duration, say 30 minutes, and the clock starts ticking now. They were given a secret ingredient. For the pastry, the people who were specializing, there were about 15 contestants in the first round of making pastries and desserts. And their secret ingredients was apple. And then for the people who were making dishes, there were about 20 contestants. Their secret ingredient was beets. And it's interesting that, put under pressure, they had to work around the clock, use that secret ingredient, and come up with a fantastic dish that not only impresses the judges, but they also get scored for culinary skill, for cleanliness, for organization, and also presentation. So that was a lot of work. And so the takeaway here really is that, when we are put under pressure and we are given access to the resources, we are really left with no other alternative but to give it our best shot. And that's what happens in most of these scenarios. We've been to multiple different types of leadership programs and events in our careers. And we'd always come away with some key takeaway. We'd always come away with a deadline. We'd come away with some key aspect of a project that we need to complete. And so some of these resources, especially time, they're very limited. And so within this limited budget or limited resource, which is time, we are under a lot of pressure to give it our best shot, do what we have to do. And so that was the key ingredient. So for leadership, for leaders to lead successfully, it's all about giving the people these key ingredients. And so from John's perspective, the key ingredient was mentor your people, give them opportunities to identify what they're good at and help them leverage that, develop for skill, develop for talent, give the training opportunities that the people need to in order to enhance their skill, constantly find opportunities to coach the right people so that the next set of leaders are groomed and organizational continuity and organizational sustainability will prevail. And last but not least, the most powerful element or the powerful ingredient there is empowerment, which is self-governance and autonomy. It's ever so important today, empowerment. And having empowerment as a key ingredient not only gives the corporation the resilience, it also leads to innovation. We've all been in these amazing group meetings where we are asked to come up with a creative idea or an innovative sort of way of doing something differently. And so that really comes down to the mentorship we've received in the past, the training, the skill training that we've got, the coaching we've got. And that gives us that empowerment in order to bring about a culture of innovation and resilience. And that really is what corporations need. Just like what the chefs had, they were given a key ingredient and they were asked to perform with a clock in the background. These are the key ingredients that successful leaders have to start building and cultivating in. And they're also so much so like core values within a corporation. Now, I put down this table here, which I thought might be interesting in order to pull together some best practices for change leadership. So right at the top is communication. And I cannot stress enough how important communication is. And a lot of education institutions, they're already doing that. We've got town halls, we've got so many different types of meetings or events or webinars or seminars that we can participate in that builds this camaraderie. It builds this sense of trust where we can ask questions and where we can really bring down these barriers and allow ourselves to embrace all of the change and all of the different elements that come with communicating with one another. So that's right at the top. Then there's a bit about empathy and vision articulation. And a lot of leaders are already doing this. A lot of organizations are equipped with these resources. Like, for example, mental health support resources. They are very important, not just for our students, but also for people that are working within an environment. And a lot of institutions, they spend a lot of time and resources developing databases of resources where employees can go and log in and read, employees can go and receive counsel if they needed to. And this not only provides sort of empathy and support, it also creates loyalty and engagement. Now, leaders are constantly driven by their vision. And that's something that sits right at the top with the corporate philosophies and agendas and so on. But what I'd like to mention is that this vision is very fluid. It's very flexible. It changes from time to time. I've been at a lot of strategic meetings that are held by corporate leaders, whether it's the president of a university or vice presidents of different departments, where they articulate their vision and then they send it down to departments to break them down into smaller bubbles so that these departments then can go away on a retreat or go away on some sort of, find the time where they can connect in an informal environment so that they bring together the bigger picture, but in smaller bubbles. And that's what the Vision 2026, Vision 2024, 2023 is all about. And this happens all the time in the corporate environment. And then we have agility and continuous learning. Agility is really about that flexibility. It comes with the change of our environment. During the pandemic, we all had to adapt. We had no other choice. We had to adapt. We had to learn technology that we've not learned before. We had to be very fluid. We had to accommodate to different changes. So much so that I remember a couple of my colleagues telling me that because of the pandemic, they had to now completely allocate a certain space in their homes, and that became their home office. And so their home has permanently changed as well. And it's all part of this agility and this flexibility. It's part of our changing circumstances and continuous learning, which is a lot of the learning that happens doesn't necessarily have to be reading huge corporate manuals or going into an orientation to learn everything we have to learn about an organization. It could be simple sessions like the one we are hosting today, the Bloomsbury speaker session. Like, this is a phenomenal opportunity for us to just connect, just hear about what others are doing, what interesting projects are going on within our corporation, what opportunities do we have that we can participate in? Can we get into collaboration with other colleagues that we've never met before? And that really is where innovation and resilience builds up. I have an interesting story about continuous learning. So, whilst being part of this huge book project, which spanned across 7 continents, we had over 100 authors and 4 different volumes. I had the opportunity to meet authors from all over the globe. I had the opportunity to meet authors from the UK, from Italy, from Australia, from Africa. And it was amazing when we had one presentation with Cornell University. And it was very thought-provoking to sit there and to have conversations with them, to realize, what they have been experiencing from their worldview, their view of the world, and what sort of projects they're working on, and what are their aspirations. And that's continuous learning. And that's an opportunity that we all have. It's available to us. It's just a matter of spending time and finding where our passion really lies. And so with that, I come towards the last part of our chapter, or rather the final end notes, which is the future of leadership. Towards the end of the chapter, when you read my chapter, you will understand that me and my co-authors really summed up together. So where's the future of leadership? It's all about creating that culture, bringing stability. It's no longer about leading with a vision or a mission. It's about leading through purpose, and aligning all of these core values together in order to create this fluid, flexible environment. And that's where leadership and leading into the future is all about. So by combining all of the core values, embracing a culture of adaptability, flexibility, and change, we are really setting our organizations and the colleagues that we work with, and even the students that we interact with on a daily basis, towards success. So I'd like to also, conclude with this quote that John mentioned before I concluded the interview with him, was that leadership is not something that's happens within a day, a month, a year, a couple of decades. It's a lifelong process. And he also goes on to elaborate and say that there are certain leaders who are born with certain traits. It's their innate ability, it's their skill. And he speaks about himself as well. And he says at a very young age, he realized that he was very passionate about coaching and mentoring and sales and speaking, communication. And he started to harness those skills. And that's what kind of eventually put him into the stage where he is today. And he also goes on to say that the other people that he has met along the way, they are leaders who learn leadership traits as they progress. So they learn leadership traits, they have been mentored and they have been coached, and they too are extremely very successful. It doesn't mean that one's more successful over the other. It's just a fine way of putting it, that some people or certain leaders have certain traits that come to them at a very early age, and they spend time honing on those skills. And certain other leaders, they adapt these certain traits along the way. Now, with that, I'd like to also bring into the stage my co-author, and I'd like my co-author to speak to us a little bit about her take. Like, we spoke a lot about leadership and the higher education. So Suma, I'd like you to talk to us a little bit about your key take on leadership. You co-authored a chapter. We've spent a lot of time discussing the chapter back and forth. It's a year-long project. So if there was something you'd like to mention as a key lesson or a key takeaway, what would you like to share with the audience today?
Thank you, ma'am. First of all, I would say I'm grateful that I'm part of this project, and thank you for giving me this opportunity. And on behalf of me and Shelly as well, we both really enjoyed working with you on this project, and very many thanks from the bottom of our hearts for this one. And moving to the takeaways, of course, I believe a leader has to be someone who has to be with the team always, in the sense like they have to understand. And once, like, every person has got different capabilities, so you need to understand the people who are with you and to see how well you can mentor them. Mentoring is a big part in any kind of leadership, what I believe. So unless you cannot mentor them properly, you won't be able to bring them up as the right, not the right, that's the wrong word actually, their potential. You have to bring out their potential and to be in the right, in a certain way that they can move forward in their life and be the exceptional person that they are. So that is what leadership is all about, what I believe. So when you are into a team, or when you are being a leader, it's different from being a manager. You are not just managing things, you are understanding their potential, and then you are bringing forward them, giving them the right training, see what is lacking. Like many people, they might be just introverts. They might be having the passion, they have the potential, but they are not able to express that. So you need to understand that, and then you need to move them or guide them in the right direction with the right, I wouldn't say push as such, but like the right nudge. so that they will, actually there are people who are late bloomers also, so they will eventually move forward and be the perfect person that they ought to be. So, and for that, you need to have an understanding leader who understands the dynamics of what is happening and to move forward and set the path straight. That's what I feel every person should be able to have that vision and to be able to execute that vision well for the the team as well as the person whom they are engaged with. That's what I feel. That's my take on leadership as such, and all the elements which plays into it becomes part of it as and when in the right degree. It's not always like something is has to be there. Sometimes like every aspect doesn't play in, but like certain aspects play more depending on the circumstances. So you need to understand the situation, circumstance, and then be the right leader for that. That's what I feel.
Thank you
Thank you.
very much, Suma. And so at the end of the chapter, well, if you have the opportunity to get a hold of a copy of the book, it's Bloomsbury will be publishing it this fall. And at the end of the chapter, each of the authors, they included a couple of bullet points, and they were like key lessons for leadership. And for me, the key lesson for leadership is as much as it's about the core values and it's about creating a hybrid model, I also think that leadership and ethical leadership are two sides of the same coin. And to be or to become an ethical leadership, it's fraught with a lot of challenges. So to be or become a moral leader is a conscious choice, and we all have the opportunity and we all have the ability to make that choice as a leader, despite all the challenges and the circumstances and the environment that we are currently in. So I thought that's a highlight, and that's very important to put down as one of the key takeaways for leadership in higher education. And with that, I'd like to conclude my presentation. Feel free to connect with me or any of my co-authors if you want to get a copy of the book or just have a conversation. Go ahead and scan the QR code and we'll continue the conversation. Thank you very much. I'll turn it over to Jenny now.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nishreena and Suma, today for your time and insights. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. We're so grateful to hear about your chapter. And I think regardless of our roles, we can reflect on our own leadership styles and our experiences with leadership, in leadership, and think about how we can bring those wise practices into our work. And Suma, your reflection at the end where you mentioned that as a leader, we need to know the people on our team and recognize that people develop at a different pace. It made me think about how, as educators, in the classroom, we need to know our students and recognize that they will learn in different ways and at different paces as well. So there's definitely takeaways here for how we lead and teach in the classroom. I'm going to see if there's any questions in the chat before I put in the links in the chat for the upcoming sessions. Actually, I'll put the links in anyway, but if there are any questions in the chat, it looks like there are a couple. I don't know if Nishreena and Suma, you have time to take a look.
Session it closes at 2, but if it's okay, I can just take a look and answer a couple of questions. I think we have a question about leaders today in every field. They're put in a position for multiple reasons, but they perform their approach and it turns out to be non-effective, toxic, and more transactional rather than inspiring. Leaders are told to go back to school and learn and understand and apply. So that's an interesting question put forward in the chat. And I'd really like to reflect on that element of where leaders are constantly learning. And I'd like to go back to the point where I said that, if we wait for our manager or our supervisor or our leader to give us the right answer, sometimes the right answer might not ever come, because at the end of the day, we are in the driving seat and we've been empowered and we have our resources and we've been skilled. And so with whatever we have, we are in a better position to come up with the right way or the right tactic or the right solution. And it doesn't have to be right. Sometimes it's just about implementing it. And then once it's implemented, we can see what worked, what did not work, and then we can bring about best practices from that. And so it's all this, it's a beautiful road, but it's like taking a drive, right? You're going on it's not a highway, it's a winding road. And as you do your turns, you need to embrace yourself to what comes. And so you embrace yourself based on your skills, your talent, your core values, and your experience. And all of this helps you then navigate these complexities. So I will, because we are running out of time, I will leave the audience with that answer for that question.